So for every one toxic, violent, or, just horrific video that actually happens to slip into your social media feed, um, a human being sitting in a quiet, windowless room had to watch and delete 1,000 worse ones.
Yeah, 1,000.
1,000 to 1.
It's staggering.
It really is. So, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are looking at the unseen human meat shield protecting your morning scroll.
Right, and I really want you to think about that ratio for a second.
Yeah, just picture it.
You wake up, you grab your phone,
Yeah.
and you start flipping through your timelines, right? You see a trending topic, a funny skit, maybe an opinion piece.
Cat videos, whatever.
Exactly. For the most part, you are wandering through a relatively safe, sanitized digital park.
And it feels completely normal. Like, it feels like the internet just naturally defaults to being a fairly clean place.
But the reality we really have to confront with our stack of sources today is that your safety is absolutely not an accident.
Not at all.
That clean feed is a manufactured illusion, and it is bought and paid for by human beings who are, well, actively absorbing the darkest, most broken parts of humanity so that you don't have to.
Yeah, and that hidden infrastructure,
Yeah.
this downstream ecosystem of trauma, is exactly our mission today.
It fundamentally changes your relationship with the technology you use every day. I mean, once you understand the architecture, keeping it stable.
Oh, for sure.
We treat the digital world like it has some inherent law of gravity, keeping the chaos grounded. But when you look at the raw data, you realize we are just entirely oblivious to this massive, invisible infrastructure of people working in relentless shifts.
Sweeping away the horrors.
Right. Sweeping away horrors that, frankly, would permanently break our understanding of human nature if we saw even a fraction of what they see before their first coffee break.
And we are pulling from an incredibly unique stack of sources to map this out. We are not just looking at dry academic white papers or, sterile corporate data sets.
No, not at all.
We are looking at a transcript from a podcast called Reclaiming You, which is hosted by a woman named Ti-Fi. And alongside that, we're actually analyzing the lyrics and the conceptual framework of her new conceptual music EP, which is titled Secondhand Survivor.
Such a powerful title.
It really is. Plus, we have some biographical background on Ti-Fi herself and two major 2026 journalistic exposés that served as the catalyst for this entire project.
And it is a brilliant set of sources, specifically because it forces us to merge the raw, visceral reality of lived experience with cold, systemic analysis.
Right.
Ti-Fi's goal here is to map what she terms the anatomy of the abuse response.
Because the prevailing societal narrative is that, well, trauma is a localized event, right?
Exactly. A crime happens to a victim, the authorities get involved, and the story just wraps up.
Wrap it up in a bow.
Right. But these sources demand we look at the kinetic flow of that trauma. We are going to follow the poison downstream.
Right, from the initial victims down to the reporters dragging the stories into the light.
And to the moderators scrubbing the platforms.
And the cybercrime units hunting the perpetrators.
Right down to the loved ones standing in the blast radius.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the premise is undeniably heavy. But the origin story of how Ti-Fi actually arrived at this thesis is what makes the whole thing click.
Yeah, it's crucial context.
So let's look at the creator first. Based on the biographical notes we have, Ti-Fi is a survivor of severe abuse.
Right.
She's a musician, an advocate, and importantly, she is actively training to become a peer support and social services worker.
Which is such a unique position to be in.
It really is.
Yeah.
So she has occupied the absolute darkest rooms imaginable as a victim. And now she is learning the clinical, structural framework of how society is supposed to pull people out of those rooms.
And that dual perspective is the engine of the entire EP. I mean, she holds the subjective, agonizing memory of the trauma, but she is acquiring the objective clinical vocabulary to dissect the systems built around it.
She's just speaking from a place of unrefined pain.
Right, exactly. She is analyzing the machinery of the response.
Yeah, and in the Reclaiming You transcript, she actually pinpoints the exact moment the concept for Secondhand Survivor crystallized.
The spark that lit the fire.
Exactly. She was reading the news in 2026, specifically two major articles. One was a massive Bloomberg piece detailing the explosion of AI-generated child sexual abuse material.
CSAM.
Right, CSAM. And how this synthetic automated nightmare is utterly crushing law enforcement agencies.
Just completely overwhelming them.
Yeah. And the second was a deeply unsettling CNN investigative expose on an online rape academy.
Oof.
Which, yeah, it was essentially a digital community explicitly dedicated to teaching, incentivizing, and sharing horrific gender-based violence.
What's fascinating here is the psychological whiplash Typhi describes experiencing in that moment.
Oh, absolutely.
She's reading these mainstream news articles, right? Looking at the sheer volume of depravity these professionals have to sift through, and she realizes this terrifying parallel.
Because in her own history, her abusers weaponized digital content against her.
Exactly. They didn't just physically abuse her. They forced her to view horrific, degrading, violent media as a form of psychological conditioning.
She calls it a blueprint in her EP,
Yeah.
right?
The blueprint.
Like a toxic syllabus.
Yeah.
They were forcing her to watch this stuff, to break down her boundaries, to map out what they were going to do to her.
To groom her into this state of paralyzed compliance.
Yeah. You read her description of that physical sensation, the way your blood runs cold, the nausea, the way your brain desperately tries to sever its connection to your body so you don't just shatter into a million pieces.
It's so visceral.
She had to sit there and absorb that digital violence just to survive the room.
Right. And the profound realization hits her when she looks at the cybercrime detectives mentioned in the Bloomberg piece or the investigative journalists from CNN.
Because she realizes they're looking at the exact same soul-destroying content.
Yes. The difference that shifts her entire worldview is the agency involved. She says in the transcript, "I looked at it because I was trapped. They look at it voluntarily."
I mean, that is such a massive paradigm shift. Because normally, you think of trauma as this incredibly isolating force.
Oh, absolutely. It traps you.
Yeah, it traps you in your own head. You feel completely alienated from society because no one could possibly understand what you saw.
Right.
But here, viewing the exact same monsters built this bizarre, powerful bridge of empathy between a survivor and the massive, faceless systems processing the crimes.
It's a really incredible connection to make.
It makes me think of trauma not as a localized explosion, but as a radiation leak.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like, you don't have to be standing at ground zero to get sick. The people miles away, wearing the hazmat suits, analyzing the fallout and trying to contain the spread.
It's absorbing the radiation, too.
Exactly.
And that radiation analogy perfectly captures the biological and psychological mechanism at play here. And Typhi uses a similar, equally resonant metaphor in the title track.
The stone in the water.
Yes. She notes that a stone dropped in water doesn't just disturb the center, right? The kinetic energy travels all the way to the shore.
The ripples.
Right. When we look at her track, the blueprint, she is singing directly to those professionals.
Yeah, let me pull up that lyric. She writes, "I empathize with every author sitting at a glowing screen, stomach turning at the violence and the horrors that they've seen.
And then she says,
I know the heavy crushing weight of what you have to see because I had to view it just to know what they would do to me."
because I had to view it just to know what they would do to me. I mean, it is such a haunting lyric.
It really sits with you.
She is taking the absolute worst, most degrading thing that happened to her, and she is weaponizing that empathy to validate the hidden pain of the people protecting us.
Weaponized empathy. I like that.
Mhm.
But to really understand how this downstream flow works, we have to start at the top of the waterfall.
Right.
Like, how does the public even find out that something like a rape academy exists?
Someone has to find it first.
Exactly. Before there's a public outcry, before there's a trial, someone has to wade into the swamp and map it out. We'd start with the journalists.
Which transitions us to the concepts explored in her track Momentum.
Yeah, let's get into that.
This section of the source material dissects the psychological cost of investigative journalism, specifically those reporters who focus on the dark web, trafficking, and gender-based violence.
Right. Because the public consumes the final product, but we rarely consider the manufacturing process of that awareness.
Exactly. Let's actually look at that process because the contrast is just jarring.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you, as the listener, probably read the CNN article about the Rape Academy. Maybe it takes you 10 minutes on your commute.
Right, you're on the train, scrolling.
Yeah. You feel a spike of disgust. Maybe you share the link to a group chat with a comment about how messed up the world is, and then you close the tab and get back to your email.
You drop in, you drop out.
Exactly.
Huh.
But the reporter whose byline is on that piece, the source text details how they spent months on it. Not days, months.
Months of constant exposure.
They are reading hundreds of pages of unredacted court transcripts. They are interviewing survivors who are actively breaking down.
And they're creating burner accounts and spending 8 hours a day scrolling through forums where perpetrators are actively celebrating their abuse.
8 hours a day. Just let that sink in.
And we cannot ignore the physiological toll of that prolonged immersion.
Right.
The text discusses how this fundamentally alters the architecture of the brain. It is the textbook definition of vicarious trauma.
Okay, I want to push back on this a little bit, just to play devil's advocate for anyone listening who might be thinking, like,
Sure, go ahead.
look, I get that it's dark, but isn't dealing with bad news literally the job description of a journalist?
That's a common argument, yeah.
Like, war correspondents have been dodging literal bullets and artillery shells for a century to get a story. How is sitting in a safe, air-conditioned newsroom, scrolling through a forum, awful as it is, how is that causing equivalent debilitating trauma?
Right, because they aren't in physical danger.
Exactly. It's stressful, sure, but they aren't getting shot at.
Well, that is the exact misconception the source material aggressively dismantles.
Okay.
We have to define the difference between occupational stress and vicarious trauma.
Break that down for me.
So, occupational stress is the pressure of a deadline. It's dealing with a demanding editor or being exhausted after a 14-hour shift. That is stress.
Normal job stuff?
Right. Vicarious trauma, on the other hand, is a literal biological rewiring of the brain's threat detection system.
Rewiring. Okay, so what does that actually look like inside the brain of the reporter?
Well, when a journalist is constantly reading these horrific transcripts and viewing this media, their amygdala, which is essentially the brain's alarm system, it gets stuck in the on position.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they are constantly processing threat data. Over months of this, their cortisol levels stay chronically elevated.
A stress hormone.
Exactly. And this prolonged exposure literally impairs the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that helps contextualize memories and safety.
Wait, so the brain forgets how to feel safe?
Yes. So even though they are sitting in an air-conditioned office, their brain is reacting as if they are surrounded by active predators.
That is terrifying.
The sources note that their baseline for safety is completely eroded. They start to see potential abusers in the grocery store line.
You can't unsee it.
Right. They look at their own children's teachers with suspicion. Trust becomes a dangerous liability, leading to severe sleep disturbances and a deep, isolating cynicism.
Wow. So they aren't just tired. Their internal radar is permanently jammed.
Permanently jammed, yes.
And the tragedy is that they are doing this to translate the trauma into a format society can actually stomach.
Exactly. They take the hit for us.
They take these raw, jagged edges of horrific reality and they smooth them down into a 2,000-word article that won't make the public immediately close the browser in terror.
Right. The lyrics in Momentum capture that transaction perfectly. Ti-Fi writes, let me see.
I have it here. They stepped so close to all the pain the victims had to know, absorbing all the sorrow where the darkest waters flow.
They felt the heavy gravity of everything we lost and paid a piece of their own piece to calculate the cost.
Paid a piece of their own piece.
It frames awareness as a commodity that has to be purchased.
Yeah, like there's a literal cost to it.
The public gets the awareness, but the reporter foots the emotional bill.
Wow.
Ti-Fi notes in the transcript that we owe them an immense debt because they refuse to let these stories die in the dark.
The survivors bring the raw truth, and the journalists build the momentum required to force an apathetic society to care.
Exactly. Momentum.
Right. But here is the inherent flaw in the digital news cycle, right? Momentum fades.
Oh, quickly.
The CNN article drops, everyone is outraged on Tuesday, and by Friday, the timeline has moved on to a celebrity scandal.
Always.
But the actual dark material, the forums, the videos, the hate speech, that stuff is still sitting on the servers.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't go anywhere.
It's still being uploaded by the terabyte. So if the journalist points the spotlight and moves on, who is physically taking out the digital trash every single hour of every single day?
And that brings us out of the newsroom and directly onto the glowing screens of the digital frontline.
The unseen shield.
Yes. We move from the people who expose the darkness to the people whose entire existence revolves around shoveling it out of sight. This is the focus of the track The Unseen Shield, where Ti-Fi provides a brutal analysis of content moderation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the corporate language around this is so sterilized.
Oh, incredibly sterilized.
We hear tech companies issue press releases about their trust and safety teams enforcing community guidelines.
Right.
It sounds so algorithmic, so clean, like a Roomba bumping around the internet, vacuuming up dust bunnies.
A Roomba for trauma.
Yeah. But Ti-Fi shatters that completely.
Yeah.
She describes content moderators as the unseen human armor of the internet.
Human armor.
We're talking about regular people sitting in quiet, often windowless rooms, staring at monitors, processing a relentless, never-ending river of human depravity.
And to really grasp the scale of this, we have to look at the metrics provided in the source.
The ratio.
Yes, Ti-Fi presents a chilling ratio to define their reality. For every single piece of toxic content, be it extreme violence, hate speech, animal abuse, or exploitation, that actually manages to slip through the filters and end up in a user's feed, a human moderator has already viewed and deleted 1,000 worse ones.
1,000 to 1.
1,000 to 1. That is the sheer volume of trauma they are physically processing with their own eyes to maintain our illusion of a clean internet.
And the mental health impact of maintaining that 1,000.1 ratio is catastrophic. The text mentions the expected outcomes: high rates of PTSD, severe burnout.
Sure, which you would expect.
But it introduces another concept that I think is even more vital to understand what happens to these workers: moral injury.
Moral injury is the critical lens through which we must view this job.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Because it is distinct from PTSD.
Right.
PTSD is generally rooted in a fear response, right? A direct threat to one's own physical life or safety.
Like being in combat.
Exactly. Moral injury, however, occurs when a person is forced to witness, fail to prevent, or sometimes participate in acts that fundamentally transgress their deepest moral beliefs.
Okay, I want to make sure I really understand the mechanism of that. Let me try an analogy.
Go for it.
It's like, imagine you are a lifeguard at a pool,
Okay.
but the rules of the job dictate that you are locked in a room and you can only watch the pool through a security camera.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you see people drowning every few minutes, but you are not allowed to run out and pull them out of the water. Your only tool, your only allowed action, is to press a button that drains the pool after the person has already gone under.
Just so the next swimmers don't have to look at it.
Exactly. Just to hide the evidence.
That is an exceptionally accurate distillation of the mechanism.
Nice. It's just so bleak.
The core of moral injury is profound. Suffocating helplessness in the face of profound evil.
Helplessness.
Right. For a content moderator, they are watching horrific abuse happen to a real human being. They cannot reach through the screen to intervene.
They can't stop the assault.
No, they cannot comfort the victim. Their only recourse against this nightmare is to click a button that says delete.
Just delete.
They are enforcing corporate policy, but they are witnessing a crime against humanity, and the dissonance between those two realities tears the psyche apart.
And the isolation makes it infinitely worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and this is the part of the text that actually made me angry,
NDAs.
we have to talk about the non-disclosure agreements.
Mm-hmm.
The NDAs. Tech companies legally bind these moderators to silence under the guise of protecting corporate secrets and user privacy.
Which is just a shield for the company.
Exactly. So you spend your entire 8-hour shift looking at the absolute worst things human beings can do to children or to women or to animals. You eat your sandwich at your desk while watching this. Then you clock out, you get in your car, you go home, and you sit down at the dinner table.
And your spouse asks, "Hey, honey, how was work today?"
Yes, and you cannot tell them.
You are legally forbidden from explaining why you were shaking or why you can't sleep.
Madness.
The source transcript emphasizes that they often cannot even fully disclose the specific details to a standard therapist without violating their employment contract and risking a massive lawsuit.
So they can't even get clinical help.
Right. They are forced to carry what Ti-Fi calls a mountain of horrors in complete silence.
It makes me think of the historical concept of the sin eater.
Oh, the sin eater. Yes.
You know, in medieval times, a community would hire someone to ritualistically eat a meal over a deceased person's body.
Right.
The belief was that the sin eater would absorb all the sins of the dead person, taking that spiritual poison into themselves so the deceased could go to heaven. These moderators are the sin eaters of the digital age. They are consuming the sins of humanity so that mothers, kids, and regular people can scroll without being spiritually and psychologically traumatized.
They take the poison into themselves.
Exactly.
Sin Eaters perfectly encapsulates the social dynamic at play here. And what is deeply moving about Ti-Fi's approach in The Unseen Shield is her response to their inevitable failure.
Failures of the shield.
Because the shield is human, and occasionally it fails, a horrific video goes viral, an abusive image makes it to the front page of a platform.
It happens all the time.
And what happens? The public, completely ignorant of the 1,000.1 ratio, immediately attacks the platform and the moderators for their incompetence.
Oh, yeah. Twitter just lights up with, how could you let this stay up?
Right. They demand to know how someone could let this slip through.
Yes. And she addresses that exact public outrage in the lyrics, and it is such a gracious reframing.
She sings,
Let me grab it. We know the Med is far too fast to catch every mistake. We know that sometimes toxic waves will crest and finally break.
but we don't judge you for the drop that makes it to the shore. We thank you for the tidal wave you stopped outside the door.
We don't judge you for the drop. We thank you for the tidal wave. I mean, coming from a survivor whose own trauma was facilitated by these platforms, that level of grace is stunning.
It is a profound act of systemic empathy.
Systemic empathy.
Right. She acknowledges that the flood is simply too grand for any human dam to hold perfectly. The transcript mentions that these moderators carry the ghosts of the images they had to delete.
The ghosts of the images.
They form a massive silent barricade, but they are permanently scarred by the materials they had to use to build it.
So the journalists blow the whistle. The moderators sweep the floor and take out the trash. But clicking delete doesn't actually stop the person uploading the file, does it?
No, it just removes it from view.
Right. If you want to stop the flood, someone has to wade into the absolute darkest waters and hunt down the source. They have to find the origin point.
The root of the problem.
And this brings us to the final tier of the downstream flow, what the source is called the edge of the abyss. We are stepping into the world of law enforcement.
This takes us into the line in the dark.
Right.
Focusing specifically on cybercrime divisions and human trafficking task forces. And it is in this section that we fully realize how terrifyingly the landscape of abuse has mutated.
Mutated is the perfect word.
Tying back to the specifics of that 2026 Bloomberg article regarding AI-generated material.
Yeah, this part of the source material was mind-bending.
It's a completely new paradigm.
The Bloomberg article highlighted that these investigators aren't just hunting physical perpetrators in basements anymore, like in a traditional police procedural.
Right, it's not like TV.
They're battling automated generative algorithms. We're talking about AI models that are capable of generating hyper-realistic abuse material, entirely synthetic nightmares, in a matter of seconds.
Milliseconds, even.
It fundamentally changes the scale of the war. But the real horror is that the investigators' burden of proof hasn't changed.
That's exactly it.
They still have to look at it.
That is the crux of the issue. To build a case that holds up in a court of law, to secure a warrant, to convince a judge, and ultimately to secure a conviction, they have to meticulously analyze the evidence.
Right.
The text explains that they must sift through terabytes of sickening files, and the process of digital forensics is agonizingly slow.
Terabytes.
Yes, they aren't just glancing at images. They are painstakingly analyzing metadata, zooming in on pixels, looking at the lighting and the geometry of a face.
Trying to find the seams?
Exactly. Trying to distinguish between a horrific AI-generated fake and a real living victim who needs immediate rescue.
I mean, think about the psychological torture of that. You are staring at a synthesized, hyper-realistic image of a child in agony, and you have to stare at it long enough to determine if the AI trained on a real victim's face to create it.
And you cannot look away.
You cannot look away. Looking away means the case falls apart. Looking away means you missed the one digital clue that might lead to a physical rescue.
So you sit there and you stare.
I want you to imagine that reality for a second. If your daily job, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, is to memorize the behavioral patterns of digital predators.
To study the exact ways they groom and exploit people.
Right. And you immerse yourself in the absolute worst of human nature. How do you go home?
Yeah.
How do you take your kid to the park without feeling a crippling sense of hypervigilance? How do you ever trust the nice neighbor across the street again?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of clinical psychology, the sources provide the grim outcome of this environment.
What's the outcome?
Well, this level of immersion breeds profound compassion fatigue. It creates a specific type of hypervigilance where, as the text notes, the world ceases to be a safe place for their own family.
Oh.
The transcript reveals that law enforcement officers in these specific units frequently deal with severe oppression, massive rates of substance abuse, and suicidal ideation.
Because they can't turn it off.
Right. They are constantly stepping into what Ti-Fi brutally calls the digital memory of where pain was born.
The digital memory of where pain was born. That phrase, I mean, it stopped me dead in my tracks.
It's brilliant writing.
Because it implies that the physical crime is already over. The worst has already happened. And the investigator is just walking through the digital echoes of it over and over again, trying to find a thread.
Trying to catch an echo.
Yeah. The song The Line in the Dark speaks directly to this haunting reality. She sings, "You step into the memory of where the pain was born." and stand beside survivors who were shattered and forlorn.
We mourn the loss of peace you pay to do this heavy task, to rip away the digital walls and pull the monster's mask.
To rip away the digital wall.
What is essential to understand about these investigators is the tragic paradox of their role.
The paradox.
Yes. To effectively hunt these predators, to care enough to sit in the dark and piece together the fragments to rescue the missing, these officers must rely heavily on their empathy.
Because if they didn't care, they wouldn't do it.
Exactly. Empathy is the fuel that drives them to do the work. The lyric state, with justice as your compass, and with empathy your guide. But that exact same empathy is what leaves their psychological doors unlocked. It is what leaves them vulnerable to the devastation of the job. Empathy is their greatest weapon against the dark, but it comes at the direct cost of their own inner peace.
They absorb the pain because they are open to it.
Right. They share this agonizing bond with the survivors because, as Ti-Fi notes, they are staring the exact same monsters in the face.
They are walking through hell to drag the perpetrators into the light.
Yes.
And having traced this entire kinetic journey of trauma, from the survivor who physically endured it, to the journalist who exposed the system, to the moderator who hid the fallout from us, to the detective who hunted the source.
We finally arrive at the synthesis of this entire deep dive.
Right. It's time to look at the broader societal implications and what Ti-Fi demands we actually do about all of this.
Because it's not just an observation, it's a thesis.
Exactly. This brings us to the core thesis of the project, drawing from the title track and the spoken transcript of Secondhand Survivor.
Right, so after analyzing the entire ecosystem, Ti-Fi provides a clear, expansive definition of the term. A secondhand survivor is anyone who intentionally steps into the blast radius of someone else's abuse to offer a shield, a voice, or a hand.
And crucially, the sources note this expands far beyond just the digital realm we've been discussing today.
Absolutely.
Ti-Fi includes the emergency room nurses who treat the physical wounds of gender-based violence.
The frontline workers.
Yeah. She includes the clinical therapists who untangle the nightmares week after week, absorbing the stories. She even includes the friends and family members who sit by the hospital bed, holding hands and catching the tears.
Because trauma is kinetic. It transfers.
It transfers.
Yeah.
If you are the person catching the downstream flow of someone else's grief, you are a secondhand survivor.
The fundamental flaw in our current societal model that Ti-Fi identifies is our reliance on the individual fortitude of these people.
Say more about that.
Well, we rely entirely on the personal empathy of the nurse, the stubborn dedication of the detective, the quiet resilience of the moderator.
We just expect them to handle it.
Exactly. But, as we established earlier with the biological mechanisms of vicarious trauma, empathy is a finite resource.
Right, the amygdala is stuck in overdrive.
Yes. It is not an endless, magically replenishing well. It drains.
It physically drains.
The source text is explicit here. This EP is not just a polite thank you note to the helpers.
Not at all.
It is, quote, a massive, urgent call to action. The people acting as our protectors are sustaining severe structural damage.
So what does this all mean? How do we actually fix the ecosystem?
Yeah.
Because it is one thing for us to sit here, listen to this analysis, and feel terrible for them.
PD doesn't change policy.
Right. Pity doesn't change policy. Ti-Fi isn't just raising awareness. She is demanding concrete systemic change. So let's break down her demands.
She outlines 4 very specific systemic changes in the transcript.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, she demands robustly funded mental health infrastructure specifically designed for both first-hand and second-hand survivors.
Because what we have now isn't working.
Right. The current corporate and governmental systems treat the professional as an unbreakable machine, offering standard EAP therapy that is entirely unequipped to handle extreme moral injury.
Yeah, a generic 1-800 number isn't going to fix moral injury.
Exactly. Second, she calls for mandated paid decompression time.
Which makes total sense.
You cannot expect a human being to view terabytes of trauma and then immediately commute home to their family without a biological buffer.
Right. Which leads right into her third demand, which I think makes the most immediate practical sense. Hazard pay.
Hazard pay, yes.
She demands hazard pay for content moderators and cybercrime units. I mean, we give hazard pay to people working with toxic chemicals or deep-sea welders or people in active war zones.
Physical hazards.
Right. Why in the world wouldn't we give it to people navigating a literal river of digital trauma?
It's a mental hazard.
The compensation must reflect the psychological destruction inherent to the work.
Exactly. The financial model must acknowledge the risk.
And the fourth demand,
Fourth, she addresses the media industry directly.
Ah, the newsrooms.
She demands that newsrooms prioritize the psychological safety of their investigative journalists over the speed of the breaking news cycle.
Scott rushing the trauma.
Right. The relentless algorithmic push for traction and engagement cannot come at the cost of the reporter's mind.
Yeah. The lyrics of the title track lay this out not as a request, but as a societal obligation.
How does it go?
We cannot take your empathy and drain it to the bone. We cannot leave our greatest shields to fight it all alone.
But who is going to listen when the nightmares come for you? It has to be society. It has to be us too.
It has to be us too.
Yeah.
That line, I mean, it drops the responsibility squarely into our laps, the public.
Right. We can't just look away.
If the protectors break, the shield falls. And if the shield falls, that sanitized, safe digital park we talked about at the very beginning of the show,
It collapses overnight.
it completely collapses. Without them, we would be drowning in the unfiltered reality of what humanity is actually producing.
And that is the full kinetic journey of trauma we set out to map today.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have followed the poison from its devastating origin point, through the victims, and down the stream to the quiet, exhausted guardians who filter it.
Right.
They are absorbing toxic waste and trying to filter it into safety, into justice, and ultimately into hope.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to talk directly to you.
Yeah, listen up.
Tomorrow morning, when you pour your coffee and start scrolling, the next time you see a content warning, blur out an image on your feed.
Or the next time you read a hard-hitting investigative headline about trafficking or abuse and feel that spike of outrage.
I want you to pause for just 1 second. Acknowledge that you are only able to consume that information safely because someone else waded through absolute hell to put it in front of you.
Someone absorbed the blow so you wouldn't have to.
Remember the unseen shields.
I will leave you with this final thought to mull over, building on the realities we've unpacked today.
Boy,
We have established that the systems keeping our physical and digital worlds safe are running almost entirely on the finite empathy of secondhand survivors.
finite empathy.
But as AI accelerates the creation of dark content to a terrifying industrial scale, and as our societal demand for instant, perfectly sanitized information only grows,
Right.
are we becoming passively complicit in draining that empathy dry? And if we are, what is your personal responsibility to replenish it?
Think about that the next time you open your feed.